Ever since middle school, I was the kid taking apart laptops and building PCs while others were still figuring out how to use a mouse. This interest turned into a skill that eventually led to an interesting situation at my old school. During my time in school, I was known as one of the top students. I had a great memory which helped me excel academically without much effort. This earned me respect from most teachers, especially my classroom teacher, who was this wonderful older lady who always looked out for me. About a week before the coronavirus lockdown started, I got a call from the IT teacher who I'd formed a friendship with during my school years. He was around 30, which made it easy for us to connect despite the teacher-student dynamic. The IT teacher called me and asked if I wanted to earn some extra money by helping him modernize the computer lab at school. I asked if the head teacher had approved this plan, and he confirmed that she was on board. He explained it would be simple work involving upgrading components and adding a new switch. I agreed, and the next day I showed up at my old school ready to work. The job was straightforward: replacing RAM, swapping hard drives, and doing general upgrades to about 15 computers. The IT teacher mentioned I could keep any of the old hard drives since they were already wiped and would otherwise be discarded. As we worked, the IT teacher told me about some staff changes at the school, including a new physical education teacher. He also mentioned there was a staff gathering later that day and invited me to meet everyone after we finished our work. Later, the IT teacher had to help the head teacher with her computer. She was in her 50s or 60s and not very tech savvy. So I continued working alone in the computer lab. I was removing hard drives from the computers and putting them in my backpack as the IT teacher had offered. While I was working on one of the teacher's computers, which needed more attention than the others, I heard someone yell from the doorway. The new PE teacher shouted at me, demanding to know what I was doing and ordering me to return to my class immediately. I tried to explain, but he interrupted me. He accused me of being a thief and stealing the computer. When he walked closer and saw the components in my backpack, he became even more agitated. He threatened to get me expelled and said he would call the police. I attempted again to explain that I worked there, but he cut me off. He insisted that he knew I was a student and demanded to know which class I was from. I explained that I was actually an ex-student, pointing out that my picture was even on the wall and that I was working there today. The PE teacher then grabbed my arm so hard it left a bruise and started dragging me toward the head teacher's office. He declared he was taking me to the head teacher and that the police would deal with me, repeatedly calling me a thief. Just then, my old classroom teacher came out of a nearby room, attracted by the commotion. She asked in shock what was happening. The PE teacher explained that he had caught me skipping class and robbing the IT room. My classroom teacher asked if I was okay and demanded that the PE teacher release me immediately. The PE teacher insisted he was taking me to the head teacher and calling the police. My classroom teacher responded angrily, saying she would call the police for me, not on him, and again demanded he let go of me. As this argument was happening, the IT teacher returned with the head teacher. They both looked shocked at the scene. The head teacher demanded to know what was going on. The PE teacher claimed I was stealing school property. The head teacher ordered him to let go of me, explaining that I was a former student and a temporary worker helping with the IT room modernization. She then suggested that it was the PE teacher whose employment might be temporary now. After the PE teacher finally released me, the head teacher called the police. They showed up quickly and the head teacher showed them footage from the security cameras in the IT room. The PE teacher was led away in handcuffs for assaulting me on school grounds. The next day I learned that the PE teacher had been fired and banned from working with children due to the assault. I finished the modernization job and even got some cake from the teachers for enduring such a ridiculous situation. The school quickly hired a new physical education teacher who turned out to be much friendlier. Apparently, he had been recommended by the previous PE teacher, not the one who assaulted me, and was looking for work at the time. The hard drives I took home gave me plenty of storage space for my projects, and I had an amazing story to tell whenever someone asked me about my worst work experience. As a flex officer working in hospital security, I bounce between different hospitals in my region depending on where they need coverage. The job has its moments, some boring, some interesting, and occasionally some truly ridiculous encounters with people who think rules don't apply to them. One of my regular assignments is at Memorial Hospital, where we use a marked security vehicle for exterior patrols. It's pretty obvious it's a security vehicle, company logo plastered on the doors and hood, and a light bar on top. Company policy requires us to have the light bar on after dark, both so people can easily spot us if they need help and to prevent anyone from accidentally hitting the vehicle. Our uniforms are also pretty unmistakable. White shirt with company patches, badge with the company logo, hospital ID that clearly says security in bold letters. We wear duty belts equipped with handcuffs, mace, radio, phone case, and flashlights. When outside, I wear a hat with the company logo front and center. You'd have to be trying really hard not to notice I'm security. One quiet night last month, things were moving at a snail's pace. The hospital was unusually calm with few visitors and no emergencies. To keep myself occupied, I decided to patrol the parking lots and check for violations. Hospital parking is always a mess, and writing a few citations would at least give me something to do. I didn't have to look long before spotting a shiny BMW taking up 2 parking spaces near the main entrance. This wasn't a case where someone accidentally parked a bit over the line. This was a deliberate diagonal park job across 2 prime spots. Classic entitled behavior. I pulled my security vehicle up so it was clearly visible, turned on the light bar, those blue and red lights flashing away, and stepped out with my citation book. After documenting the violation with photos and noting the vehicle information, I wrote up the ticket and tucked it under the windshield wiper. Then I returned to my vehicle to complete the necessary paperwork for my report. I was just finishing up when I noticed a woman storming toward my vehicle. Her face was red, and she was clutching a purse like she might swing it at me. I stepped out to address her concerns. The woman immediately started shouting at me, demanding to know what I was doing to her car. She yelled that it was private property and that I had no right to touch it. Before I could even finish my first word of response, she interrupted me, threatening to call security and have me removed. I told her that wouldn't be necessary since I was already a security officer at the hospital. She looked me up and down with narrowed eyes and rudely questioned why I wasn't wearing my uniform. I politely pointed to my jacket with the company logo patch on my shoulder. She dismissed this by claiming the logo was too small for her to see. I patiently explained that my hat also had the logo, and I pointed out the cruiser with its flashing lights and security markings across the hood and doors. I apologized for any confusion this might have caused her. By this point, I was standing directly under a parking lot light. The reflective security patches on my uniform were practically glowing. The security vehicle behind me had its light bars still flashing blue and red. Short of having a neon sign above my head, I couldn't have been more obviously security. The woman complained that security staff needed to be more identifiable and claimed she thought I was some hooligan trying to vandalize her car. I was tired and just wanted to finish my paperwork, so I decided to wrap this up by apologizing again for the confusion and wishing her a safe trip home. When I turned to head back to my vehicle, she grabbed my arm and asked if I was going to remove the ticket. I told her that the citation would stand because she was clearly parked across 2 spaces which violated hospital policy. She protested, saying she had explained she didn't know who I was and couldn't be expected to pay the fine. I explained that her confusion about my identity didn't change the fact that she had parked illegally. The ticket was for the parking violation, not for our interaction. She demanded to speak to my supervisor. I told her she was welcome to contact the security office the next day and pointed out that the number was printed on the citation. The woman became even more agitated, exclaiming that the situation was outrageous. She tried to intimidate me by asking if I knew who her husband was, revealing he was supposedly the head of cardiology at the hospital. I replied that even if her husband was the hospital CEO, parking regulations applied to everyone equally. I then offered to either escort her safely to her car or end the conversation with the understanding she could take it up with my supervisor the next day. She stormed off to her car angrily. As she got in, I could see her on her phone, probably calling her husband to complain. The next day, my supervisor called me into his office. Apparently, the woman had indeed complained, but it backfired spectacularly. Her husband, who really was a doctor at the hospital, had apologized profusely for his wife's behavior and insisted on paying the fine immediately. He even brought coffee for the security team as a peace offering. My supervisor just shook his head and told me I handled it well. The citation stood, and I got a free coffee out of it. Not a bad day's work for hospital security. After 8 years in the Marines, I was looking for something that would still let me use my security training without all the stress of active duty. The warehouse I work at as a loss prevention agent processes lost mail orders. You wouldn't believe the stuff that ends up there. Everything from expensive car parts and jewelry to electronics and even gun parts. Once a week, we open to the public for auctions, selling these unclaimed items at steep discounts. That's when my job gets interesting. Most days, I'm in the security office monitoring cameras, but on auction nights, we need all hands on deck. My team includes several off-duty police officers and a former detective who served the city for 30 years. We need the extra security because the warehouse is in a rough part of town, and the promise of discounted high-value items attracts all sorts of characters. Regular customers are usually fine. They know the drill and follow the rules. It's the newcomers who often cause problems, especially the ones who think their money gives them special privileges. Last Thursday night, I was assigned to parking lot duty. Our lot wasn't designed for the traffic we get during auctions, so someone needs to direct cars and keep people from parking in the employee section. I was standing at the employee lot entrance in my full security uniform, company polo with security clearly visible, duty belt complete with taser, handcuffs, my loss prevention badge, and my gun. Given our location and history of break-ins, we're authorized to carry. I was directing a family toward the customer parking area when I heard the roar of an engine. A Mercedes SUV came tearing through the lot, nearly hitting several pedestrians, and blew right past me as if I wasn't even there, pulling into an employee spot. A man stepped out with his family radiating entitlement. His expression said it all. I'm better than everyone here. I approached him and explained that he couldn't park there as the space was reserved for employees, and he needed to find a spot somewhere else. The man looked me up and down with contempt. He questioned my authority to tell him where he could park, suggesting I might be trying to save the spot for someone else. I gestured to my uniform, my badge, and the security equipment on my belt, emphasizing that I was security for the facility and repeating that he couldn't park in the employee lot. He dismissed me, accusing me of trying to scam him out of his parking spot. My patience was wearing thin. My Marine training taught me discipline, but it also left me with little tolerance for disrespect. I raised my voice and told him he needed to move his vehicle immediately. He seemed shocked that someone would speak to him that way, then change tactics. He pointed out that he didn't see any other cars in the area, questioning where these supposed employees were. He actually made air quotes with his fingers when he referred to the employees. That was it for me. I tersely told him that I didn't care what he could or couldn't see and repeated my instruction that he move his car now or it would be towed. He angrily called me a rent-a-cop and threatened that his father was a retired police officer who knew every cop in the city. He warned that he would make my life a living hell. Little did he know about our connections with the local police department. Between our off-duty officers and our former detective who sits on the police department board, we have excellent relationships with law enforcement. I replied that he could have his father call the impound lot after his car got towed. By now I was speaking loudly enough that other customers were staring. The entitled customer scoffed dramatically and stormed back to his car. On his way, he threatened that I'd made a huge mistake and would be spending the night in jail. He jumped into his Mercedes and sped off, deliberately swerving toward me. I had to jump out of the way to avoid being hit. The whole incident was captured on our security cameras. I immediately radioed my supervisor and wrote down the man's license plate number. We decided to file a police report for the reckless driving and what appeared to be an attempt to hit me with his vehicle. 2 hours later, while I was back at my security station, my radio crackled. My supervisor told me that he'd just received a call from Detective Rodriguez. They had picked up our entitled friend at his home after reviewing the footage and had recognized his plates immediately. Turns out, the "my dad knows every cop" line was a complete bluff. Not only did his father not know every cop, but his aggressive driving caught on our security cameras resulted in him being charged with attempted assault with a vehicle. The next auction night, a week later, I noticed a woman I didn't recognize approach the security office. She looked uncomfortable. She identified herself as the wife of the man who had been arrested the previous week after an incident at our facility and wanted to apologize for his behavior. I recognized her as the entitled customer's wife. She explained that her husband had anger issues but had never faced consequences before because they were wealthy enough to make problems disappear. She expressed hope that spending the night in jail might finally make him realize he couldn't treat people that way. I guess sometimes entitlement meets reality in the most satisfying ways. I'm an apartment manager and my 2-bedroom unit would normally cost a fortune in this area, so I put up with the occasional maintenance calls and resident complaints. Plus, I genuinely enjoy creating a nice community for people. This complex has some great amenities: a gym, a small theater room, and the crown jewel, a beautiful pool area with a hot tub. The pool is surrounded by palm trees, has plenty of lounge chairs, and even includes 3 private cabanas that residents can reserve for small gatherings. Our policy is simple. Residents can bring up to 2 guests to the pool area and they must stay with their guests at all times. If someone wants to host more than 2 people, they need to reserve one of the cabanas. The rules exist because the pool area isn't massive, and we want to ensure all residents have fair access to the amenities they're paying for. Everything was going smoothly until last Saturday. I was off duty, enjoying a rare day off by the pool with my roommate. We had our books, some snacks, and were planning to relax for the afternoon. Around 2 p.m., a woman I'd never seen before walked in with 6 children ranging from about 5 to 12 years old. They immediately spread out across the pool area, taking over lounge chairs and jumping into the pool with loud splashes. The woman set down her large bag, took out a magazine, and settled into a chair without even acknowledging anyone else. I noticed a few residents giving each other confused looks, and one couple packed up their things and left. After about 10 minutes of disruption, I decided I needed to say something. I approached her chair and put on my professional smile. I politely asked her if she was a resident here. She barely looked up from her magazine and told me that she wasn't but was visiting her sister. I then asked if her sister was here with her. She replied that her sister had to work today. I took a deep breath and explained to her that our policy requires guests to be accompanied by a resident at all times, and that each resident can only bring 2 guests to the pool area unless they've reserved a cabana. She finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. She argued that her sister pays a lot of money to live here, so she thought her family should be able to use the facilities. I told her I understood but explained that the policy exists to ensure all residents have fair access to amenities. I pointed out that there were about 7 of them which would require a cabana reservation. The woman rolled her eyes and waved her hand dismissively. She complained that the cabanas were all empty and claimed they weren't bothering anyone. I looked around, noticing more residents were watching the interaction now. I countered that several residents seemed uncomfortable and that the rules apply to everyone, regardless of whether the cabanas are currently in use. I suggested that if her sister would like to reserve one for their group, she could do so through the resident portal. She responded by saying this was ridiculous and that the kids were just trying to have fun. She then demanded to know who I was. I simply said that I was the property manager. Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly recovered her indignant expression. She said she wasn't leaving and claimed her sister told her they could use the pool anytime. At this point, one of the kids did a cannonball right next to where 2 elderly residents were sitting, splashing them and their books. That was the last straw. I stood up straight and dropped the friendly tone. I told her she had two options. Either she and the children leave now, or I would call security to escort them out and her sister would receive a violation notice that could affect her lease. She asked if I knew who her sister was. I replied that I didn't know who her sister was, but I did know our lease agreement, and it clearly states that residents are responsible for their guests' conduct. I then asked her what she was going to choose. She stared at me for a moment, then called out to the kids. She told them they were leaving and added that this place was terrible anyway. When they gathered their things, she turned to me one last time. She threatened that she would be telling her sister about this and that I could expect a complaint. I encouraged her to do so, saying I'd be happy to review the guest policy with her sister as well. After they left, several residents thanked me. One older gentleman even gave me a thumbs up from across the pool. The next day, I did indeed receive an email from the sister apologizing profusely. Apparently, her sister had a habit of borrowing amenities without permission and had told the sister she'd checked with management first. The resident was mortified when she heard what happened and assured me it wouldn't happen again. As a goodwill gesture, I helped her properly reserve a cabana for the following weekend so her family could visit according to the rules. When they came, the sister avoided eye contact with me, but the kids were well behaved and everyone followed the guidelines. I was just glad the resident understood and took responsibility instead of doubling down on her sister.